Let's get into it now. A spoiler-free movie review of Superman, who is quite possibly my least favorite of the most popular superheroes. This movie didn't make me love him, but it made me really like him, and I think that's a big win here. I'm probably a bigger fan of James Gunn than I've ever been Superman, and now I want James Gunn just to do every single superhero ever made. Because when James Gunn makes a movie, he makes it truly something unique. By the end of this movie, I didn't want it to end, and I truly felt for those 2 hours that I was in that theater, I escaped and I was on another planet. And I have not felt that way while watching a superhero movie in a really long time. That took me back to early phase one MCU, where whenever I was in that theater, I completely escaped from reality, didn't think about any real life problems. I was right there with David Corenswet as Superman, totally just living in this world. And there are so many things I love about the movie. The visuals, which I thought the color palette was just fantastic. If you have a great color palette in a movie, it is just going to win me over. I talk about that all the time. But when it comes to somebody who just knows how to use color, it is James Gunn. Specifically with the Guardians of the Galaxy, where he really just had this wonderful cosmic color palette, which I feel he also adopted into this movie, where the blues look so blue and rich, the reds are very deep and just pop off the screen, the yellows are perfect, has one of my favorite uses of color in any movie, where whenever we first had that tease of Superman and we saw him in what seemed to be an apartment lacing up his boots and something going on behind him, that was such a fantastic scene because you have this nighttime scene and Metropolis and this incredible just neon cosmic color thing happening behind him. And that scene alone is a great example of how much attention to detail James Gunn has, which is what I love about his work, which is what I loved about this film. Is that was just a simple scene where any other movie just would have had the characters talking and be the forefront of that. But he has something going on in the background that is just extra, showing you that, hey, we're going to do everything in this movie that we can. We're going to put everything in here. And even things in the background are going to be visually stimulating for you. That is what I enjoyed so much about this. So what this story is about, you have Superman in about his third year of being a hero, which I think is also a fresh approach. One, because you don't get that origin story, which I think we don't really need origin stories in any superhero at this point. Even if it's totally new characters that we don't know, I just feel that the origin story format has been done so much of a superhero figuring out their powers. We've all been there before, no matter what character it is, so I'm glad we didn't have to go through that with Superman. He's 3 years in. You don't need to know about his parents in Kansas. You just need to know that he's pretty new with this. And I think that is what made me finally start to enjoy this character. Because one of my biggest problems with Superman is, dude doesn't have flaws. He's always perfect. He's always just like good looking, doing the right thing. And there was never anything that felt human to him because he is an alien, because he is from another planet. Where here, you have him actually struggling with things. The movie starts with him losing a battle. That's not a spoiler. That's how it literally opens. The moment we saw in the trailer of him in the snow just panting and bloody, that's how this movie opens up. And that's the tone that it sets, is that Superman isn't going to be perfect in this. He's not going to be almighty and powerful. I enjoyed that because that's what I've been waiting to see. And I think the people who do have a problem with this movie are kind of the opposite of me, because you want to see what you do love about the character, him being just ultra powerful, always knowing what to do, easily defeating his villains or finding a way to defeat his villains pretty easily. That's not the case here. Superman needs the help of his friends. He needs the help of Lois Lane. At times, even needs the help of the city. And for the first time ever, I started to see myself a little bit in the character. And that's something I've never been able to do with Superman. The first hour of this movie just flew by. I love the angles that they use with Superman flying throughout the sky, which were very just big close-ups that felt like they just came off the pages of a comic book. A lot of moments of action in this movie felt like they were literally ripped out of a comic book, which made for really interesting framing, a lot of great shots that not only made it look different than any other superhero movie, but really just anything out there right now in the last couple of years, that it made use of every single inch on the screen. I thought David Corenswet was a fantastic Superman, a fantastic Clark Kent, that really showed some depth to these characters, which is something that we did not see in Man of Steel. In Man of Steel, I did not care about Clark Kent as a person. I didn't care about Lois Lane. I cared more about the action. But by the first just 10 minutes of this movie, I was sold on their relationship. I was rooting for them. The character development throughout this entire movie had me caring for characters I never thought I could. And that is something that James Gunn does. Also, taking characters we're not that familiar with and making them so impactful. And I think he does this by putting together a really great cast and having the perfect people play these parts. If you want to talk about one of the best villains in the last 10 to 15, maybe even 20 years, Nicholas Hoult as Lex Luthor is right up there. I haven't felt that angry towards a character and wanted to see their fall so much since Thanos. He is at that level. And Nicholas Hoult just plays that character so well, where I could watch him and Superman hate each other all movie long. Give me a sequel, give me a trilogy. I think that dynamic between those characters was perfect and the real driving force of this movie, because that is what I've been missing in a superhero film, to have a villain that is worthy of the entire runtime, where there are moments that you're questioning yourself as the viewer, like, is our hero going to make it through? Because every move that Superman made, Lex Luthor was right there to take him down. So it was this constant battle of them going back and forth, back and forth. And I think that might be the frustration of some people being haters of this movie, of not liking that power dynamic. There was a big struggle here, but you have to go back and think about, again, it's those 3 years. He is so new into this role. He's still figuring things out. He's a much younger Superman. But I think that is what we need right now in the DC world, because this is the type of character that has the ability to carry all of DC with what they are trying to do now. This world is being established in a really big way, and I think that's what you have to build it on. Aside from David Corenswet, aside from Nicholas Hoult, Rachel Brosnahan was also fantastic at Lois Lane. The supporting cast in this movie was just top notch, which I was glad for. The Justice Gang with Nathan Fillion as the Green Lantern. I love Metamorpho, which was played by NoHo Hank if you were a fan of Barry. Mr. Terrific, though, was a big standout that I would just watch a solo Mr. Terrific movie. I just think that character is that good, that could carry an entire movie. So to have him there as a supporting character, that I think maybe another thing people may have a problem with was all the characters. But I think in this case, more characters the better, because they're all just so unique and different. From Crypto, Metamorpho, even Superman's robots. There wasn't a character that I just thought, oh, that was kind of a waste of time. So I feel like pretty easily this became my favorite Superman movie ever, even going back to the originals. And I think it's because it is that mix of the original Christopher Reeves movies, the Man of Steel without being totally 2000s metal music video, having some of those elements of action, but also having that whimsical comic book feel and completely separating itself from anything on the MCU side, where I think now going into Fantastic Four, my expectations are going to be so much higher, because they do kind of have that both classic vibe to it, with Fantastic Four being set back in the day, even though the Superman movie is set in modern times. When you look at them together, they kind of have like that old school aesthetic. So I worry if Fantastic Four just goes back to the well of everything the MCU has been doing for the last 5 years, it is going to lack that big wow factor in comparison after what Superman just did. I'm not saying that this movie has reinvented the genre, but it has pumped some fresh blood into the body, which is a big win for DC. Did massive amounts at the box office opening weekend, is probably going to crush again going into the next weekend, leading up to Fantastic Four. And I really think the competition is good, because if you have DC starting to have some really big success with some of their legacy characters, it's going to make Marvel start to ramp things up as well. Dare I say, an almost perfect movie. There are very few things I did not like about it. And if I were to tell you the things that kept me from rating this movie a 5, we would get into spoiler territory. But just know, it is that good. And it also greatly benefits from seeing it in theaters. This is one of those event movies that you have to experience in theaters. And it's almost to the point when we do have these major, huge movies, you almost get that 1 to 2 week spoiler free window just because, much like a live sporting event like the Super Bowl, I think when it comes to something that moves the needle, like a DC movie at this level or even an Avengers movie, you get that 1 to 2 week window before you're like, all right, spoiler free here. Again, I won't get into spoiler territory unless I decide to do a spoiler episode, because then you have actors starting to post things online, much like we saw with the Thunderbolts, because they're excited about it, because people want to talk about it and discuss it more openly. I just think it starts to get to a point where you get 1 to 2 weeks, and then if you don't see it in theaters, you're going to have to know, you're going to start seeing people talk about it more openly online. That's why I went to go see it opening night. So for Superman, now has me really enjoying the character, which I was always a fan of the comics. If there was one of my favorite storylines of Superman from the comics that I want to see them turn into a movie, it is Death of Superman, which there is an animated version of that movie. Highly recommend that. That is one of my favorite superhero stories, so I don't know if we could ever get to that point, seeing James Gunn make a Death of Superman movie. But for Superman, I give it 4.5 out of 5 cryptos.